Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady, for yielding back. Now recognize gentlelady Ms. Cammack for her 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to everyone for making the trip down here. Thank you to our witnesses. We'll jump right into it. Going down the line, Sheriff, do you believe that we have a crisis at the southwest border?
Yes, ma'am.
Doctor?
Yep. I would say, look, I'm not, as a healthcare provider, I'm more of an expert about what happens when it
Just
comes
yes
over the
or no,
border.
please.
I can speak to if,
You
we don't have the
personally do
infrastructure
yes,
there.
just yes or no?
Look, I'm not an expert on border immigration policies. I think I can
Okay.
talk to what happens on the other side if we don't.
Okay,
have-
so I'm sorry, I have to reclaim my time. Ms. Garza, do we have a crisis at the southwest border? Yes.
We have a humanitarian crisis, yes.
Thank you.
I don't just believe, I know we have a crisis.
Thank you. Ms. Garza, how many shifts or ride-alongs have you done with Customs and Border Patrol agents or Texas DPS?
Actually, a few. I have represented hundreds of children in immigration
when did you do these
detention
ride-alongs?
locally. In 2018, 2017. It's been some time. I spent some time at
you
OFO,
haven't,
also on the
you
bridge
have
on
not,
the ports
I'm
of
sorry, I'm
entry
going to
and
reclaim my
spoken
time.
with people.
So you have not done a ride-along or worked a shift along Texas DPS or our Border Patrol agents since the Biden administration has been in office?
Ma'am, I've been practicing
Correct?
immigration law
Or
since
yes
the
or no?
Obama administration in this region.
That's just a yes or no? Yes or no?
Ma'am, I've been practicing immigration
That's
law.
not
I'm an
answering my
attorney.
question.
I'm not a police officer.
Okay.
I'm not an officer.
So then you haven't. So you said earlier, quote, Operation Lone Star has not resulted in any sort of reduction of fentanyl deaths in your respective districts, talking about our districts, end quote. You referenced Operation Lone Star more than 3 times today in your testimony and in answering questions, saying that it's essentially a waste of taxpayer funds.
Yes.
I want to look at the results of Operation Lone Star to date since it took place in 2021. 361 million lethal doses of fentanyl have been apprehended, have been confiscated. That's just Operation Lone Star. That doesn't include what CBP or Border Patrol has actually confiscated. So going back to what you said, that Operation Lone Star is not stopping any fentanyl deaths, that it's a waste of money. How do you explain the 361 million lethal doses that have been confiscated? And I guess in your opinion, what is the price of a life then?
We are talking about billions of dollars that have further militarized this region and the state of Texas. It has been a waste of taxpayer
361 million
dollars.
lethal doses is a
We
waste
need
of
to-
taxpayer dollars?
Look, we both care about a solution here. We
Is
need
three-
to address the fentanyl issue.
I'm going to reclaim my
but it
time.
is
When I
not
reclaim my time, that
through
means you have to stop talking.
militarization.
361 million lethal doses is a waste of taxpayer money in your opinion, yes or no?
I believe that Operation Lone Star is illegal.
So
and
you
that
think it is a waste of money. Ms. Garza, you
taxpayer
stated,
dollars.
you said, quote, I don't understand why we are here at the border. There is no connection, end quote. Let me show you what the connection is. This is a brick of fentanyl that was found in my district in Florida, in Marion County. This is 958 grams of fentanyl. The people who had that brick of fentanyl crossed the border illegally. That is the connection. And it's not just my district. Every single one of these members here today have illegal substances in their district as a result of the Biden open border policies. That is the connection. Every single one of us has constituents who have been poisoned as a result. To say that there is no connection, that is wildly inappropriate, unacceptable. And to the families that have lost loved ones as a result of the open border policies, you should apologize. There is a direct connection. It's right here. In my
Ma'am, they are not coming on the backs of individuals that are seeking asylum. That is
in
a
my
fact.
county, Marion County, and I represent 12 counties. In Marion County alone, over 70% of the 200 monthly overdoses are fentanyl. These are fentanyl poisonings. And as it has been made clear here today by my colleagues, only 5 to 10% of the fentanyl that is being smuggled over the border into the United States is documented. That's what we know of. This is a crisis. I only have about 25 seconds, so I'm going to end with this. Do you agree? Because I went through your Twitter feed. I went through several of the things that you've posted. You talk a lot about social justice. Do you believe that social justice Is Biden taking $130 million from homeless veterans programs under FEMA and redirecting it to the border crisis here?
I believe that you're using the border as a political talking point.
Please answer the question.
And we do not appreciate that.
Answer the question. Let the record reflect that the witness has declined to answer the question under oath.
All right, we'll so
yield.
reflect.
His consent to enter into the record a letter dated June 25th, 2020, to Mark Zuckerberg from Chad Wolf, the acting Secretary of Homeland Security, in which he asked Facebook to keep Americans safe by taking appropriate action consistent with your terms of service against content that promotes, incites, or assists the commission of eminent illegal activities. Those committed to protecting free exchange of ideas should not turn a blind eye to illegal activity and violence fermenting in your platform. This is after the summer in which Black Lives Matter protests took place.
Without objection, gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for appearing here today. I know it doesn't feel exactly warm and fuzzy, but believe me, I think what you guys are doing is very important. We're here to discuss the weaponization of government, and I want to follow up on my colleague, Representative Massey's comments on the CDC. Up on the screen, you can see an email from October of 2020. This is from then NIH Director Francis Collins to Dr. Anthony Fauci. It goes on in to say this proposal, talking about the Great Barrington Declaration, is from 3 fringe epidemiologists who met with the secretary, and it seems to be getting a lot of attention, even a signature, a co-signature from a Nobel Prize winner. Key line in here that I would like to point out. There needs to be a, quote, quick and devastating published takedown of its premises. I don't see anything like that online yet. Is it underway? Signed, Francis. Now, what I find interesting is if you fast forward into June of 2021, the Biden administration was raging at social media companies. There is communications that we can produce for the record that state we would like you to combat, quote unquote, misinformation. Now, we, thanks to the Twitter files, know that Twitter executives were using the term visibility filtering, and that really, to the rest of the American general public, was shadow banning, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So all of a sudden, we saw a rash of blacklists created by Twitter at the highest levels that were taking down some of the signatories and creators of this very Barrington Declaration, correct? This is to both of you.
I haven't seen that, but...
I haven't seen that either.
So would you agree that there was a blacklist created in 2021?
Sorry, yes, Jay Bhattacharya, the
Yes.
Stanford professor, who I don't think anybody considers a fringe epidemiologist, was indeed, I'm sorry, I didn't piece it together. He was indeed visibility filtered.
Correct. And so this blacklist that was created that really was used to deplatform, reduce visibility,
Yes.
create lists internally where people couldn't even see their profiles. That was used against doctors and scientists who produced information that was contrary to what the CDC was putting out, despite the fact that we now know that what they were publishing had scientific basis and, in fact, was valid.
Absolutely, and not only that, but these are secret blacklists. So Professor Bhattacharya had no idea he was on it. I mean, this is East Germany Stasi kind of behavior. That's what this is. And the Great Barrington Declaration, by the way, I was skeptical of it at the time, but it actually now looks pretty good in terms of how response to COVID. But even if it was totally wrong, it still deserved, I mean, this is the whole point of the First Amendment, is that
Absolutely.
I think we all have the experience of you're not right until you're wrong a lot. You know, you actually have to have that debate and that conversation. So by repressing that, we actually stifled, I think, a much broader conversation we could have had about how to effectively respond to COVID because they were secretly blacklisting people like Jay Bhattacharya.
And I think to the bigger point that Americans are concerned about when it comes to the weaponization of government, this isn't Republican or Democrat issue, this is an American issue. You had individuals, millions of Americans, who in many cases were being mandated to take an experimental vaccine, and when those that wanted to consider taking it were trying to make an informed decision, you had opinions that were being silenced because it didn't fit a specific narrative pushed by the Biden administration, correct?
Absolutely correct, and that's why we use the language of disfavored ideas and disfavored people, because it doesn't fall neatly among left and right lines. If there's anything going on here, it tends to be more of a disproportionate blacklisting of more populist voices, or just ideas that we would consider slightly outside of the Overton window, the mainstream opinion at the time, but the Overton window moves. And so the idea that you're just going to narrow the entire, what's acceptable on social media to what is mainstream at the time would basically freeze us and not allow the society to progress and for knowledge to grow and for the democracy to function.
With the 14 seconds that I have left, Mr. Taibbi, if you'd like to weigh in on any of this that we have talked about and why this is a direct threat to Americans today, I would appreciate it.
just quickly, again, we yesterday discovered this email talking about the suppression of people telling their own stories of true vaccine side effects. So these are people who are telling about their own experiences, things that happen to them that are true, and they're being suppressed because what anti-disinformation does is the opposite of what the press does. They are aiming for what the narrative is, and they already know in advance what they're looking for, whereas a journalist goes into a story, does not know what the truth is. We often find that the thing we expect to find turns out to be completely different. They know in advance what they're looking for, and that's why this is so dangerous.
My time has expired. I yield back. Thank you, too.
Yields back. Chair recognizes the lady from Florida, Ms. Cammack, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Shou, are you aware of Chinese Communist Party leader Chairman Xi Jinping's comments in May 2021 during a Communist Politburo study session where he instructed colleagues to target different countries, different audiences with short-form video? Are you aware of these comments? Yes or no?
Congressman, I'm not aware of these comments.
Okay. Well, and as was pointed out by Chairwoman Rogers, you have regular contact with Chinese Communist Party Secretary, Mr. Zhang Fuping, who is your boss at ByteDance, correct?
No.
No.
No. He's
Interesting.
neither my boss, nor do we have frequent contact.
But you have regular contact with ByteDance.
With the CEO of ByteDance.
Who is, Mr. Zhang Fuping is the
He's not.
editor-in-chief.
He's not the
My
CEO.
colleague, Representative Burgess, a few minutes ago exposed that TikTok and ByteDance share legal teams. You confirmed this, correct?
Our general counsel is
Yes.
an
Yes or
American lawyer,
Yes.
veteran of Microsoft.
Also, my
many years.
colleague, Representative Latta, confirmed that your parent company, ByteDance, currently can access user data. Yes?
We have to be more
Yes.
specific.
Yes.
After
You
Project
say-
Texas, no.
I'm not asking after Project Texas, I'm asking now. Yes.
Some user data is public data, Congresswoman, which
So
means
you
everybody
confirm that.
can search
What's
for it on the
interesting to
internet.
me is that you have used the word transparency over a half a dozen times in your opening testimony and subsequently again in your answers to my colleagues. Yet the interesting thing to me is that ByteDance, your parent company, has gone out of their way to hide an airbrush corporate structure ties to the CCP, the company's founder, and their activities. You can look no further than the fact that ByteDance's website has been scrubbed. In fact, we found web pages from the Beijing Internet Association, the industry association charged with Communist Party building work of internet companies in Beijing. They have been archived, but since deleted. Makes you kind of wonder why. Yes or no, ByteDance is required to have a member of the Chinese government on its board with veto power. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct. ByteDance owns some Chinese businesses, and you're talking about a very special subsidiary that is
Mr.
for
Shou,
Chinese business licensing.
Mr. Shou,
purposes.
I'm going to have to move on. You've said repeatedly that there is no threat, that this is a platform for entertainment and for fun. I have to ask you then, if there is no threat to Americans, if there is no threat to our data, privacy, security, why did an internal memo from TikTok corporate headquarters explicitly coach senior management to, quote, downplay the parent company ByteDance? Why would they say downplay the China Association and downplay AI? This is from an internal memo from your company.
Why, if you had nothing to hide, would you need to downplay the association with ByteDance in China?
Congresswoman, I have not seen this memo.
You can't
What I
answer
can
that
say-
question. Mr. Show, I'd like to direct your attention to the screen for a short video, if you don't mind. Mr. Show, that video was posted 41 days ago. As you can see, it is captioned me as F at the House Energy and Commerce Committee on March 23rd of this year. This video was posted before this hearing was publicly noticed. I think that's a very interesting point to raise. But more concerning is the fact that it names this chairwoman by name. Your own community guidelines state that you have a firm stance against enabling violence on or off TikTok. We do not allow people to use our platform to threaten or incite violence or to promote violent extremist organizations, individuals, or acts. When there is a threat to public safety or an account is used to promote or glorify off-platform violence, we ban the account. This video has been up for 41 days. It is a direct threat to the chairwoman of this committee, the people in this room, and yet it still remains on the platform. And you expect us to believe that you are capable of maintaining the data security, privacy, and security of 150 million Americans where you can't even protect the people in this room? I think that is a blatant display of how vulnerable people who use TikTok are. You couldn't take action after 41 days when a clear threat, a very violent threat to the chairwoman of this committee and the members of this committee was posted on your platform. You damn well know that you cannot protect the data and security of this committee or the 150 million users of your app because it is an extension of the CCP. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing before us here today. I've heard your last name pronounced a couple of different ways today. How is it properly pronounced?
Seligman, thank you very much.
Seligman?
Seligman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seligman. You stated you are an expert in constitutional law, correct?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. In your testimony, your written testimony, which was provided to us late last night, it says that, quote, and this is your writing, no government official ever threatened any social media platform with adverse action if a platform declined to moderate content flagged by the official or if a platform decided not to take an official's suggestions. Do you stand by your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Now, a few minutes ago, just prior, you said that members of the legislative branch don't qualify for this particular statement, despite the fact that you said no government official ever. Does a representative in Congress constitute a government official?
Well, let me clarify my testimony from earlier. I don't think that legislative proposals that were brought by Republicans or Democrats constitute threats against social media platforms. That's true whether with respect to Section 230 reform. It's true with respect to antitrust enforcement.
So that would then lead us to the natural inclination to believe that you're talking about the executive branch, correct? Being government officials. So government officials like the Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of Digital Strategy like Robert Flattery, or the White House Senior Advisor like Andrew Slavitt, or the NSC staffer Katie Colas, or the Deputy Assistant to the President, or the White House Digital Director, or the Press Secretary for the First Lady, or the NSC Director for Counterterrorism, the Chief of Staff for the Office of Digital Strategy, the Director of Strategic Communication and Engagement, the White House Associate Counsel, Associate Director for Communications, the Deputy Director of Digital Strategy, and the Strategic Director of Digital Communications. Those are government officials, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and what's so interesting is that all of these members of the executive branch, all of them have communications, thousands of emails between them and Twitter and Meta officials where they demand that posts be taken down and censored. I'll give you a couple of examples, and then we'll see if you still feel so strongly about your words. January 23rd, 3 days after the inauguration, at 1:04 a.m., Clark Humphrey of the White House emails Twitter and says, "We're flagging this post for you. Hey folks, wanted to flag this tweet, wondering if we can get moving on the process to have it taken down, ... ASAP." Then, on February 7th, an email exchange took place between Twitter and White House Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of Digital Strategy, Rob Flattery, and asked for the steps that he could take to, quote, streamline the process for the White House's demands for Twitter censorship. Then 2 days later, on February 9th, 2021, he follows up again with Facebook with a more aggressive demand for more information, along with an accusation that would be repeated many times in the future, that Facebook was failing to censor speech on its platform, and it was causing, quote, political violence. Fast forward, you have March 15th, White House senior advisor then made an ominous statement threatening unspecified executive action against Facebook in retaliation for Facebook's perceived lack of cooperation with the White House's list of demands that have been documented and will be inserted into the record for this hearing on censorship of, quote, borderline content. The line that I think is particularly troubling is saying, internally, we have been considering our options on what to do about it. Do you consider that to be non-threatening?
I'm not familiar with the particular documents that you're referring to.
I just read you multiple examples.
Yes, and so I don't think that emphatic expressions of their concerns about the problem of misinformation is a threat. I don't.
So when President Biden says that social media companies are killing people, and then there is a direct line from the White House to the social media companies demanding posts be removed, going so far as to say there has to be a quick and devastating takedown, a published takedown, that is not a threat?
I don't believe so.
Wow.
I also don't believe it was a threat when President Trump made comments about
I am
social
so glad
media
we
as
have
well.
this on the record. Again, my apologies to you, sir, for what you've had to endure here today, but with that, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady's time's expired.
Well, good morning. I really can't say that this today, what you are hearing, what you will be hearing more of in this hearing in the coming hours, it couldn't be overstated how important this is. I think Representative Gates, you just laid out very succinctly why this is so critical. You know, I know a lot of people back home are wondering, you know, we hear about this weaponization, you guys get up here, you investigate, but nothing ever seems to happen. Think about this for a minute, though. Why this is so critical that we are investigating the weaponization of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice. As was pointed out, if you are a parent and you attend a school board meeting, there could be an FBI agent in the parking lot scribbling down your license plate number. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is actually testimony that these brave whistleblowers have given us. That is not America that I know. If you are a Catholic and you want to attend Catholic Mass, perhaps there is an informant inside reporting on what you are doing inside. This is the thing that novels are written about. This is spy movies. If you think about the FBI whistleblowers who have come forward bravely, this today will demonstrate the pattern that the FBI has used in retaliating against them and their families, because their families have served just as honorably alongside them. These men have served our country, both in law enforcement and in the United States military. Furthermore, as we have seen, these are decorated individuals who were led down a path only to find themselves left out in the cold, iced out. And this was by design. When the FBI was questioned about this, the word that kept coming back was, it's a coincidence. It's a coincidence that they leave these people in a position where they cannot seek outside employment, they cannot access their personal belongings, despite the fact that these men have served their country. But even worse, the loyalty to the nation has been questioned. This is truly the weaponization of government. Whether you are the President of the United States, as we have seen in the Durham report, whether or not you are a parent concerned about your child's education, whether you are just someone who wants to go to Mass, you could find yourself a target of the FBI. This FBI certainly knows no bounds, and we are seeing that in every single interview, in every single piece of evidence that we uncover. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg, but I would like to reiterate what what Representative Matt Gaetz said earlier. This is not about the good men and women of the FBI, the rank and file agents who do their job honorably. No, this is about the political corruption at the very top that has seeped down into every field office across this nation. If you don't toe the company line, you might find yourself a target of the FBI, whether you are an outsider or an insider. And that is what we seek to uncover. One of my colleagues here today will outline some of the key retaliation points, so I don't want to belabor that point. But I do want to say to those that are concerned that we investigate and there is no subsequent action, everyone standing behind me agrees. We have to present the evidence, we have to deliver that evidence, and then we have to take action to make sure that there are consequences, but also that this never happens again. That is why in this particular case, I am so glad that the treatment of these whistleblowers is being referred to by the U.S. Office of Special Counsel and the Inspector General for further investigation. And I would encourage you all today in today's hearing to witness the treatment that these whistleblowers will receive from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle who will seek to discredit them at every turn. I would like you to keep in mind the contrast during the January 6th testimony of how their whistleblowers were treated. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague from the great state of Wyoming, Representative Harriet Hageman.
The gentlelady from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all our gentlemen for appearing before us today and coming forward. I want to thank you again for your courage today and also for your service to our nation. And as we predicted, our Democrat colleagues have immediately opened up with claims of conspiracy theories, MAGA extremism, mock outrage. Seems the only ones displaying mock outrage up here today are, in fact, the Democrats. Because according to them, journalists who appear before us aren't journalists, and you here today are not whistleblowers, but we, in fact, know that you are. But interesting times. The line about Republicans defunding police, that one seems to be particularly special because, respectfully, to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, as the wife of a SWAT medic, as the wife of a first responder currently who has served our community for the last 16 years, I can tell you with certainty that no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. No one. And I see from you nodding your head that you agree with that sentiment. It is inaccurate and wrong to make that assumption that Republicans want to defund police. It is false. Because forcing a political agenda down the throats of our hardworking men and women of the FBI with the threat and then subsequent follow-through of retaliation because they are whistleblowers, because they didn't want to break the law, because they knew that it was wrong to target Americans without cause, and they swore an oath to the United States Constitution, not to a political party. That makes them whistleblowers. That makes them courageous for coming forward and telling the truth. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you all to please turn on your microphones because we're going to go really fast, okay? Mr. Friend, during your service with the FBI, you served on the FBI SWAT team, correct?
Yes.
As you heard, my husband is a SWAT medic and has been part of joint operations with the FBI. So I would like to know, what is the threshold for these call-outs? And can you briefly detail the type of crimes warranted for an FBI SWAT team call-out?
There's a threat matrix, the SWAT matrix, in order to utilize the tactical team, but it could be as easy as somebody being in possession of a firearm or a request from a local agency just to use the FBI SWAT team.
Okay, so Mr. Friend, your security clearance was suspended by the FBI after raising concerns for the use of excessive force with regard to the use of FBI SWAT teams to your direct supervisor, correct?
Yes.
Would you consider this retaliation?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. O'Boyle, you were suspended without pay from the FBI on September 23rd, correct?
I was initially suspended on the 26th. The suspension of pay came a little bit later.
Thank you for that clarification. You had raised concerns to your chain of command when no action was taken, that you reported these concerns then to Congress, correct?
Correct.
Once you contacted Congress, you were then suspended. Your top secret security clearance was then suspended for those protected disclosures to Congress, correct?
Correct.
That seems like retaliation, no?
That's to me.
Okay. Mr. Allen, you were suspended from the FBI without pay on January 10th, correct?
That is correct.
You were suspended because you sent links to your squad to provide situational awareness about the FBI investigation on January 6th, correct?
Yes.
Yes or no? Wasn't open source searches and sharing of information part of the duties of your job?
Yes.
And subsequently, after doing your job and your supervisors not liking the tone of the open source articles you provided because it didn't fit the FBI's narrative, your security clearance was revoked, correct? To all our whistleblowers, yes or no, do you believe that the retaliation pattern has a cooling effect on other agents from coming forward or speaking up? Yes or no? Mr. O'Boyle.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you believe that the FBI is purposefully hostile to you for that reason, to keep agents from speaking up?
Yes.
Yes, without question.
Yes.
So I think it's clear we have a pattern here. If you speak up about the abuses you are seen as an agent, or are sharing information that may not fall in line with the FBI's political narrative, you will be suspended without pay, have your security clearance revoked, and your life will be turned upside down. It's pretty clear that the MO is if you don't comply, they will retaliate. If you don't agree with the political agenda, you get suspended. And they do it in such a way to deter others from speaking up and speaking out. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the weaponization of government. That is the weaponization of government, and that is why we are here today. Not because we have a political agenda, not because we are here to go over events of the past. We want to fix it. We have to expose it, stop it, and prevent it from happening again. That is why we are here. These men are whistleblowers. The gentlemen who came before us in previous hearings, they were journalists. And just because you don't address them as such does not mean that they are not who they say they are. They have been retaliated against, and regardless of your party affiliation, this behavior is unacceptable, and we need to stop it. Republicans, Democrats, independents alike, this is a concern we should all share. This is the weaponization of government, and it is our job, our constitutional duty to stop it. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes.
Hey guys, Congresswoman Kat Cammack here, and it is another day in Washington where another bombshell report comes out about the weaponization of the federal government, its agencies against the American people. Today, it is the report demonstrating full-blown evidence of the Ukrainian Select Intelligence Service directing the United States FBI to censor Americans. Yeah. A foreign government directing our FBI to collude with social media companies, American social media companies, to take down posts that American citizens had made concerning Russia, Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, you name it. So it's pretty damning. It's a 22-page report. I have been reading 26-page report. I've been reading through it. Here it is. I included the link for you guys to actually read this. There's an executive summary that gives you a really brief overview of the full details of the report. But let me tell you, this is extraordinarily damning. I mean, this is absurd. I can't sum it up better than to say the FBI has a counterintelligence division that is purposely designed to combat and fight foreign influence. Instead, we're seeing where the FBI is now facilitating foreign influence. This is absurd. This is outrageous and unacceptable. And another example of where the weaponization of the FBI has continued to run rampant. So the report goes into some pretty explicit detail of them not only taking bits, directives from the SBU, which is the Ukrainian intelligence service. They are sending spreadsheets of thousands of social media posts that they deem to be somehow harmful to Ukraine. From there, the FBI then takes that spreadsheet, flags those posts for Google, Meta, Twitter, you name it. All of the social media companies are contacted through the FBI, and then subsequently those posts are taken down. But it gets worse. From there, the FBI finds time in their very busy day to actually follow up with these social media companies to ensure that the posts have been taken down, to the point that they established the idea of a 24/7 channel. You heard it right, a 24/7 channel that was basically a pipeline from Ukraine through the FBI to the social media companies so that they could remove these posts. Now, the thing that's wild to me is that President Zelensky fired the head of SBU on July of 2022. July of 2022. Zelensky fires the head of the SBU, the Ukrainian intelligence service, because of infiltration, because of double agents. It is so corrupt that he has to fire the head and start gutting the entire agency. So you have the FBI taking directives from this unit, from the SBU, the Ukrainian intelligence agency, and not vetting the posts, but actually just going ahead and just passing it along like they're the middleman. Now, some of the people who had their posts taken down are people like a children's book author from Washington State. You had a manager of a maintenance company from South Carolina who had some of his posts taken down. One of the things that I found absolutely hilarious and terribly sad at the same time was that several of the posts were posts from official verified State Department accounts. The Ukrainian government was directing the FBI to coordinate with social media companies to take down United States State Department posts. Wild. Absolutely wild. It goes on to talk about the emails that were exchanged, how this has played out for years. But the underlying issue here is that you have a foreign government directing the erosion of our civil liberties as Americans. And I think that that is so incredibly unacceptable, infuriating, and no one's talking about it. No one's talking about it. You turn on the news, they're talking about Biden economics. They're talking about some more of the culture war issues that we're facing that are important and infuriating. But what's wild to me is that you have blatant black and white, and like here are the emails. Like we have copies of the emails that demonstrate how rotten the top of the FBI has become, how political it has become. And again, I say this all the time when I'm talking about this. The rank and file men and women of the FBI who are just trying to do their job, they're not part of the problem. Who is the problem is the political appointees at the top. And those are the ones that we need to go after. We need to hold them accountable. And so this is just another example of the weaponization that we're going to be continuing to highlight and expose. But I know so many of you are frustrated. You're like, yeah, we know they're bad. What are you doing about it? There is a litany of legislative solutions that we're looking at. 100%. And we're going to pursue those to the very, very end, because it's not enough to just highlight the problem. You have to fix the problem. So this is not me getting on here and bitching about the problem. We are actually fixing the problem, but you have to identify it first. And I think it is so important that we expose this, because regardless of whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or young or old, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that everyone is seeing that you could potentially be a target and censored and have your rights eroded because you spoke out or you questioned or you posted something that they being the political appointees at the highest levels of the FBI, or in this particular case, members of the Ukrainian government who may or may not work for the Russian government, who may be a double agent. We don't know. Some of the posts were pro-Russia. Some of them were anti-Russia. It was really kind of a mixed bag, which again points to how there was no vetting of these posts. There was no rhyme or reason. And the fact that we have sent over $113 billion to Ukraine for this war, money of which I did not support. It's not that my heart does not break for the Ukrainian people and the civilians and everything that's going on. That's not it at all. It's that there is very little accountability with the money that has been spent, the weapons that have been sent, and we continue to perpetuate the corruption without any accountability by allowing this behavior to continue. So
I think this is 100% a great example of why the work that we're doing on the Weaponization Select Committee is so important. I'm super proud to serve on this committee, and we have a very short window of time in which to get all of this information gathered. And trust me, this is stuff that people have suspected, but now we actually have evidence. This is where it is so important to do these investigations, because from here, then we can apply the legislative fixes so that this doesn't happen again, and then make the proper referrals to the Department of Justice, who then is forced to take action, right? Because remember, Congress doesn't arrest people. I know that that is something that so many people have been asking for, like, when are people going to get arrested? Congress doesn't arrest people. For any member that's out there saying, oh, we're going to be arresting people, we're going to, throw them in jail, guess what? There is a reason why there's a separation of powers. We are the legislative branch, and I think we would all be good, all be wise to really start thinking in ways that can actually move the needle forward rather than just this outrage, entertainment that is constantly going. So that is my Tuesday sound bit, but I read this report. My mind was absolutely just blown. We'd been dealing with all these transcribed interviews and depositions and all the work that the staff and the teams are doing. And it's so damning in black and white. So I encourage you guys, read this report. Really, seriously, read this report, and I'll answer as many questions as I can, but I included the link to it. I encourage you to take a look at it. And again, doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, this affects every single American. So appreciate you guys. Crazy week ahead. Lots going on with NDAA, FAA reauthorization. We have appropriations, Farm Bill. So much is going on, and I'll be giving you an update about all of that tomorrow. But just wanted to drop a line about this wild report that is absolutely worth your time. Like I said, it's a short one. It's only 26 pages. Definitely an easy read. I encourage you to check it out. Take care. God bless.
Committee will come to order. Committee will come to order. Ms. Cammack had asked unanimous consent for the committee to watch the video. There was an objection. I'm going to yield now to Mr. Pallone for the purposes of his objection.
I looked at the video, but I insist on my objection because I have to be honest, I don't even understand what the person is saying. It's all, to me, it's just almost impossible for us to understand what he's saying and how it relates to what we're discussing here. Even the authentication is difficult. So I insist on the objection, Madam Chair.
Instead of a unanimous consent, the committee, I'm going to ask then that the committee vote as to whether or not to see the video. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. The ayes have it.
Recorded vote, Madam Chair.
Yes, for a recorded vote. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson. Bouchon. Bouchon votes aye. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Cammack. Cammack votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone. Pallone votes no. Eshu. Eshu votes no. DeGette. DeGette votes no. Schakowsky. Matsui. Matsui votes no. Castor. Castor votes no. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes no. Tonko.
No.
Tonko votes no. Clark? Cardenas? Cardenas votes no. Ruiz? Ruiz votes no. Peters? Dingle? Dingle votes no. Veazey? Custer? Custer votes no. Kelly? Kelly votes no. Barragan? Blount Rochester? Blount Rochester votes no. Soto? Soto votes no. Craig? Craig votes no. Schreier? Schreier votes no. Trahan? Trahan votes no. Fletcher? Fletcher votes no. Chair Rogers? Chair Rogers votes aye.
Then recorded.
Mr. Johnson is not recorded. Johnson votes aye.
The clerk will report the vote.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there are 26 ayes and 18 noes.
The ayes have it. We will watch the video. Okay.
So 80% or so of my practice is gender affirming surgery. So I do facial, chest surgery, and genital surgery. But the majority of my practice and sort of where my passion lies is really genital surgery cases. So I do a lot of vaginoplasty and a lot of phalloplasty. I would just say they're expanding in either direction. So yeah, a lot of adolescents presenting for surgical intervention, but also a lot of people that are like in their 70s sometimes coming in for genital surgery, and then everything in between. But the adolescents for sure present some unique challenges. Obviously, there's great evidence supporting pubertal suppression for a whole variety of benefits. But the one thing that is very new is genital surgery in someone that has underwent pubertal suppression. Not so much an issue in someone with assigned female at birth anatomy that undergoes a phalloplasty, because we're creating something with a free tissue transfer, a flap anyway, but a much bigger issue for an individual that's undergoing a penile inversion vaginoplasty. Because we use all of that tissue to basically create the vulva as well as line the internal vaginal canal. And as a specialty, those of us that do a fairly high volume of genital gender affirming surgery, we've maybe done a handful of pubertally suppressed adolescents as a field, and no one's published on it yet. OHSU we're just putting our first series together as we're kind of learning and figuring out what works. But it's really changing things because you don't have enough tissue to line the vaginal canal. So you either have to take a skin graft or take skin from elsewhere or use some artificial product. The way that we're dealing with it is by using a robot, and we're basically performing intra-abdominal components of the surgery. So we're using peritoneum, which is the inner lining of the abdomen, to line most of the vaginal canal. And by doing that, that allows us to use all of the remaining tissue externally to create a vulva and try to make also an aesthetic result.
So what we just witnessed was an interview last week from Dr. Blair Peters, who is a gender-affirming surgery expert at the University of Oregon's Health and Science Division. Earlier today, just a few minutes ago, our colleagues on the left said that we didn't know what we were talking about. So when presented with a video that details exactly what it means to conduct surgery on a minor for gender-affirming surgery, they left the room. They don't want the facts. And as you heard from the specialist who does these surgeries, they don't know what they don't know. They don't understand the long-term effects. There is not even published information, peer-reviewed information backing up the claims that our colleagues on the left have said. We are here today to fund children's hospitals, not to mutilate them with experimental surgeries that we do not have science and data that backs up the claims that the left has made today. So I stand with my colleagues in funding these children's hospitals, but I also am very disappointed in my colleagues on the left who opted to leave the room in protest and refuse to watch a video from an expert on their own side. With that, Madam Chairwoman, I thank you for allowing me to show this video, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion on the amendment?
To bring this up, and since the door was opened, you know, I'm deeply concerned about the fact that there were FEC reports brought up. Mr. Kennedy, you acknowledged that you don't know where those came from. You said that you have no affiliation with those, that PAC, that super PAC, I believe. The ranking member said she was deeply concerned about the affiliation, and we seem to have a guilty by association theme going on here. And so I just have to state for the record that I myself am deeply concerned about the affiliation of the convicted sex trafficker, Jeffrey Epstein, of which the ranking member took campaign donation money from. So I think that's the beauty of the First Amendment, is that we have a right to say what we want to say, but we also have the right to be offended. So I just wanted to point that out, you know, glass houses and all. Our Democrat colleague, Mr. Lynch, opened up the door of what does the impact of the continued narrative of weaponization have on the general public? And I think that's really important, because what we have seen in the last couple of weeks is irrefutable evidence of the fact that the FBI has not only been systematically working to censor American speech, but they have been facilitating it, and in some cases at the behest of foreign governments. A weaponization report proved that there was a direct connection between the Ukrainian SBU, in which that intelligence service was sending spreadsheets of thousands of posts, in some cases posts that were belonging to the United States State Department. And because we know that the Ukrainian SBU is rife with double agents, the FBI wasn't even vetting the posts. They were simply sending them direct to the social media companies saying, please take these down. So now we have an FBI that is not just saying that they're going to fight foreign interference, they're facilitating it. At one point even suggesting that they put forward a 24/7 channel where the FBI takes requests from a foreign government and filters it right to the social media company to have those posts taken down. And it was across the board, anti-Ukraine, pro-Ukraine. That right there proves that they weren't vetting the posts. That's a problem. We've established clearly with hard evidence that there is in fact a weaponization of the federal government against the American people, and every single day that we do not acknowledge it is a bad day in America. The pillars of our constitutional republic, not democracy, are being taken down bit by bit because the press is being told they can't ask the tough questions. Ms. Morris, you have probably received threats, you have been censored, you have been silenced. Mr. Sauer, you have been before us many times, and you have expressed the pushback, the threats that you have received. Mr. Kennedy, I can't imagine what you receive on a daily basis from both the left and the right. So I'm going to go to our Democratic colleague, Mr. Lynch, and ask the question, what impact does the continued narrative of weaponization have on the general public? I know he framed this in a way to make a point that it is somehow negative to ask the tough questions, but I'm going to ask our three witnesses here, what are the ramifications if we don't talk about it, if we don't expose it? And I only have 25 seconds, so Mr. Sauer, take it away.
If federal censorship is not stood up to aggressively, it will expand to every corner of online discourse.
Ms. Morris.
It's just this, I can't even believe this is a conversation. Like, this is not controversial or taboo. We live in the United States of America, and you have the right to say whatever you want, to print whatever you want, and to read whatever you want.
Mr. Kennedy.
A government that can censor its critics has license for every atrocity. It is the beginning of totalitarianism. There's never been a time in history when we look back and the guys who were censoring people were the good guys. All of us grew up reading Arthur Koestler, Robert Heinlein, Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, and they were all saying the same thing. Once you start censoring, you're on your way to dystopia and totalitarianism.
And I know my time has expired, but Mr. Sauer, you said earlier, censorship is about power. Censorship is about control. And the entire progressive leftist agenda is about nothing more than dependency and control. That is why this is so important. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Chair,
Chairman.
I want to thank all our witnesses for being in front of us here today. I know that this has not been an easy couple of hours, but I appreciate your endurance. I'll start with you, Ms. Wiley. 5 days ago, Democrat Representative Pramila Jayapal stated that she has been, quote, fighting to make it clear that Israel is a racist state. Yes or no, do you believe that statement to be anti-Semitic?
I believe that there is a distinction between any
just a yes or
conversation
no.
about a government versus a group of people.
So do you believe that each of my Democratic colleagues should publicly denounce her comments?
Well,
and not continue to give her a platform to make statements like Israel is a racist nation? Because essentially that is what is happening here. We are 100% trying to censor one gentleman because one side doesn't agree with his comments. So in a weaponization hearing about censorship, the left is trying to censor, which I think is absolutely crazy, and at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 90, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-272, offered by Mrs. Cammack of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 864, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Cammack, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of my amendment, which would restrict funds at federal agencies such as the Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, and other related agencies from being used to finalize any rule or regulation that have an annual effect on the economy of $100 million or more. Since President Biden took office over 2 years ago, his administration has added several billion, with a B, of dollars in new regulatory costs to the economy. Agencies like OSHA, the CDC, and EBSA often impose compliance costs and regulatory hurdles that create mass confusion for businesses and the healthcare industry. My amendment seeks to prevent these agencies from finalizing new major rules and regulations which often involve major policy decisions that should be decided by Congress, not nameless, faceless bureaucrats. By including my amendment in this bill, we restore Congress's Article 1 authority by bringing major policy questions back to the elected representatives of the people. We commit ourselves once again to open governance rather than allowing the regulatory regime to make decisions behind closed doors. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen where OSHA was issuing burdensome health rules under questionable legal authority. 15 months into the pandemic, OSHA issued a mandatory workplace safety rule that required healthcare facilities to develop COVID-19 plans, install barriers between workplaces, and impose mask mandates. Once OSHA failed to finalize this rule, they sought to impose another rule covering assisted living facilities and other healthcare workers in March of 2022. This rule created even more confusion among the healthcare industry leaders, who then saw overlapping guidance and conflicting guidance within OSHA and the CDC, as well as CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Now, outside the burden of compliance with these rules, violating these murky OSHA measures could land a business with financial penalties up to $15,000 per violation and up to over $150,000 for repeated violations. These penalties, in other words, could completely drown a business in costs. Furthermore, we have seen where the Department of Labor finalized a rule directing the federal government to treat climate change as a threat to workers' retirement savings. Now, sponsors of investment-based employee plans are directed to take ESG factors like carbon emissions into their investment decisions instead of strictly applying the fiduciary duties under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act.
This shift to an ESG standard, as it turns out, is not a prudent investing plan at all. According to the Harvard Business Review, assets under management at global exchange traded sustainability funds have not fared well financially. Even worse, researchers have found that U.S. companies and ESG portfolios have had worse compliance records for both environmental and labor rules than companies in non-ESG portfolios. The evidence, however inconvenient for my colleagues on the other side, it's overwhelming that hardworking Americans' retirement plans should not be subject to a radical climate change agenda at the Department of Labor. It is simple. Congress should make these major policy decisions here in the People's House rather than the regulatory regime. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Florida reserves. The gentleman. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I claim the time in opposition.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I rise in strong opposition to the amendment. This amendment is absurd and would bring the Medicare program to a standstill. If this amendment were to be enacted, Health and Human Services would be prohibited from finalizing rules for paying physicians, hospitals, nursing homes, or any other healthcare supplier or provider, which would throw the Medicare program into chaos. Now, I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't really like Medicare, but now they want to throw it into chaos. By law, Medicare issues annual sales that govern how it runs the programs it pays for services that Medicare beneficiaries need. These rules are always major rules of over $100 million, and they happen by law several times a year so that Medicare beneficiaries know the rules of the programs and providers know how they will get paid for the upcoming year. If this amendment were enacted, Medicare would not be able to pay physicians or hospitals or new services. Medicare would not be able to pay for new drugs or devices. Medicare would not be able to pay rural hospitals that depend on Medicare to stay open to serve beneficiaries in rural areas. These rules always exceed $100 million because they govern how Medicare pays for services for its 60 million beneficiaries. In short, this amendment would cause a massive disruption to health care for millions of seniors and individuals with disabilities. The amendment is not a serious policy proposal. It really is a campaign slogan. I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
How much time do I have remaining, Mr. Speaker?
The gentlewoman from Florida has 1.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know how else to quite say this, so I'm just going to lay it out bluntly. That is a lie, what was just spelled out. The notion that CMS will cease to operate because they do not have the capability to just issue regulations at random or at will is nonsense. I think it is absolutely absurd that the representatives of the People's House do not have a final say in major economic implications for people who utilize Medicare. I think it is ridiculous that if you are a physician, you have to go through your member of Congress to get in touch with CMS. When we talk about nameless, faceless bureaucrats, we're talking about this amendment, which would fix not only the financial burden that people have to bear as a result of an overactive regulatory regime, but restoring the open accountability process here in Congress. This is the People's House. We should be absolutely responsible for the impacts that every single one of our constituents has to bear as a result of the work that is being done here on Capitol Hill. If you pick up the phone and call CMS, you can't find a single person who will answer that phone. You cannot call up OSHA and ask for answers. You cannot get answers out of the federal government, which is why half of the team that we employ in Congress is based back home in our districts in order to liaison with these federal agencies. We have got to restore accountability, restore Article 1 authority, and with that, Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to pass this amendment.
The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
I continue to oppose this. the information, I just didn't make it up. I don't know where the gentlelady's information is coming from. This came from the Ways and Means Committee. I'm not making it up. It's not anecdotal. Amendment enacted, Medicare not be able to pay physicians or hospitals for new services. Medicare not be able to pay for new drugs and devices. Not to pay rural hospitals that depend on Medicare to stay open to serve beneficiaries in rural areas. Because these rules exceed $100 million. Because they govern how Medicare pays for the services for the 60 million beneficiaries. We have that information. I do not know where the gentlelady has received her information, and I suspect maybe it's not understanding the scope and the reach of CMS and its oversight of Medicare beneficiaries and the services that they need. I oppose the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The chair understands that amendment number 91 will not be offered. It is now in order to consider amendment number 92, printed in Part B of House Report 118-272. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona?
Much my time having expired, yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, for the life of me, I cannot find anywhere in the public notices, in our meeting memos, in our congressional hearing documents, any mention of where this is a hearing about President Trump. It escapes me. I know that we have a literacy crisis in this country, and I am shocked that it has made its way to the halls of Congress. I think we should do something about that. Anyways, I speak for all Americans, I believe, when I say that it really shouldn't matter who's in office. It really shouldn't matter who is in the White House. Because regardless, we should all be concerned about our constitutional rights. We should all be here protecting our constitutional rights. And so I would encourage my Democratic colleagues that maybe they should, I don't know, focus on the evidence that has been presented here, because it impacts all Americans, not just Republicans, but Democrats too. So I think that we could actually do something to address the weaponization of government in a bipartisan fashion, because it has tremendous impacts on our everyday life. So I'm gonna just jump right into it. Ms. Troy, I appreciate you being here. My colleague, Mr. Bishop, touched on this, but I wanna just make sure that I am exceptionally clear. You said that, quote, the government is not taking social media posts down, end quote. This is from your opening statement. You said that the censorship of American people is, quote, the result of the social media companies exercising their First Amendment rights. You were part of Vice President Pence's team, were you not?
Yes, that is correct.
And so as someone who is familiar with White House officials, you can confirm that the Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of Digital Strategy, Rob Flattery, and the White House Senior Advisor, Andrew Slavitt, are indeed government officials and not social media executives, correct?
Yes, when they were serving in the White House, they are government officials.
Okay, so on February 6, 2021 at 9:45 p.m., I just love when we have timestamps and all this in writing. It helps tremendously. When Mr. Flattery emailed Twitter executives demanding the immediate removal of accounts linked to Biden's adult daughter, he stated, please remove this account immediately. He also stated, quote, I have tried to use your form 3 times. It won't work. I think this is ridiculous that I need to upload my ID to prove that I am an authorized representative of the president. 2 minutes later, at 9:47 p.m., Twitter executives responded saying, thanks for sending this over. We'll escalate for further review here. He shot back. I cannot stress the degree to which this needs to be resolved immediately. Those accounts were then suspended and taken down. Now, fast forward about a month, Mr. Slavitt, Biden's White House senior advisor, said in writing, you know, it would be nice to establish trust with Twitter executives. Internally, we have been considering what our options are on what to do about non-compliance. Is that a threat? Would you consider that a threat from Biden White House officials to social media company executives to censor Americans' First Amendment rights?
I think you would have to ask that question to them. I can't speak for what was intended by that message.
If you were in that position, what would you do?
Well, Actually, I can tell you because I've had conversations with social media companies during the Trump administration while on Mike Pence's office, where I did call a social media company, and we did say, could you please take these photos down, if possible, because a U.S. missionary was killed brutally in Cameroon.
Yeah.
And Charles Wesco from Indiana, whose brother serves as a Republican in the Indiana state legislature. It was his brother who was killed brutally. And the ambassador from Cameroon, U.S. ambassador, did weigh in and say, can we take these down while they circulate to notify the next of kin before they see these horrific images of their father brutally murdered in a crossfire between two different opposing groups in Cameroon.
Absolutely, Ms. Troy. That is heartbreaking. And
We
hold on, I've
flagged
got to
the
reclaim my
graphic
time here.
images.
But so, Ms.
Can
Troy,
I
what I'm
answer?
saying is,
Can I
I
finish
just
my
presented,
answer?
no, ma'am, I presented you with a parody account that the White House had to take down, a parody. That is a very different situation than graphic photos of a tragedy. Would you agree?
I am speaking.
That's a simple yes or no.
About a situation where
Ms.
a
Troy,
White
if you
House person
cannot,
or
if you
government
cannot
person
distinguish
weighed in
between a
on
parody
removal of
account
images
and
from
memes
social
and
media.
jokes versus graphic photos, that's a problem.
I can't speak to what they were referencing. I don't know.
I
if
just
it's
laid it out
of
for you,
interest.
but I'll reclaim my time. I'm going to switch to you, Mr. Schellenberger and Mr. Taibbi. Thank you guys for appearing here before. In a very short order, I have to go appear before the CDC director, Dr. Cohen. Please talk about the treasure trove of evidence that you have found with regard to the CDC silencing world-renowned epidemiologists such as Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and the impact that that has had on public health and the health of various Americans around the country because of the work of the CDC and FDA silencing these voices.
Time of the gentlewoman has expired, but that the witnesses can respond and answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just very briefly, during a crisis, you need free speech so you can respond, you can have these issues, you can debate them, and what we saw was both Harvard epidemiologist Martin Kilduff and Stanford epidemiologist Jay Bhattacharya were both censored. Dr. Bhattacharya was put on a trends blacklist. The things that they were advocating was mainstream epidemiology, and their voices were stifled, and we now have seen the consequences of it, most particularly this horrendous learning loss among children that could have been avoided if we had adopted what Dr. Bhattacharya was recommending.
Mr. Taibbi, go ahead.
Just quickly, if I could, yeah, the trends blacklist image that we saw with Dr. Bhattacharya, that was one of the very first things that we found in the Twitter files. And it was an early example of what we came to understand as malinformation. It's the idea of something that's not untrue or it is true, but is believed to produce an undesirable political result. This is extremely dangerous. Dr. Bhattacharya has had a legitimate scientific opinion. He turned out to be correct. His study was later ratified by the WHO. But it was considered to be against the policies of the current government. And so he became one of the most suppressed people in the country during 2020 and 21, which is exactly what the First Amendment was designed to prevent.
I would just point out before recognizing Mr. Goldman that we will take you up on what you said, Ms. Troy. Ms. Cammack asked you a question and about Mr. Slavitt and Mr.